I'm, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we can always upload to YouTube later.
Yeah, good. Okay. Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting for December 7, 2021. Acknowledging that we are meeting electronically and honored to gather on the unceded territory of the Squamish Nation. We have an agenda before us. Corporate Officer, is there anything to add to the agenda this time?
I have nothing further to add at this time.
Okay, excellent. So I'll ask then council, I'll call the meeting to order at time being, it must be 3:01 or so, and ask for approval of the agenda. Councilor Crowell, thank you. Councilor Andrade, thank you. All in favor? Thank you. And just to acknowledge that Stafford Lumley, Councilor Lumley is not available this afternoon to join us. He may join us for the in-camera session a little later. We'll contact him and let him know what time that goes forward. Okay, so motion to receive all the reports and information on the agenda today. Councilor Crowell, thank you. And Councilor Ladwig, thank you. All in favor? Thank you very much. And we're going to go over to Councilor Andrade, notice of motion on cat bylaw. So Councilor Andrade, thank you, and thank you for your very extensive information in the package.
Thank you, Mayor and councilors. I really appreciate the opportunity. To present this, and most information I'm presenting here is not new at all. If councilors had the opportunity to read the report, and I cited all the references. This information was part of the package was actually presented before a year ago, actually, by Ian Anderson. And so what I decided to do, I know at the time we discussed briefly, but I decided to do because I think what is new for us is that now we became part of the Biosphere Reserve, which first commitment, if you go to the package that I provided, and we can see what is a Unesco Biosphere Reserve. The main function, the first function of the Biosphere Reserve is actually conservation and protection of biodiversity. And then on their management plan, they also emphasize, their second main objectives of the management plan is that biodiversity conservation within the region is understood and preserved for future generations. So I think this is another layer. And just so I decided to put this package just to recap the information because, we go in our everyday, there's so much going on in the world right now in our lives and we forget. But I just want to bring again some statistics and from Environment Canada. I have here and I provided on the reference. It's a study done in 2013 by Peter Blanchard, which was an Environment Canada employee. And he talks about birds killed by cats in Canada. And he says, he suggests a very substantial mortality of birds with roughly 100 to 350 million birds killed annually by 5 to 10 million outdoors cats. And so, and then he goes on and say, the current estimates of birds killed per year by cats translate to roughly 2 to 7% of birds in southern Canada. This is quite significant. And he says, at that level of annual mortality, it is reasonable to expect there may be consequence for bird populations. So here we are in the Biosphere Reserve where our main function is to preserve biodiversity. And birds do play a big role in biodiversity, in ecosystem health and balance. They disperse seeds, they control pests, they change complete landscapes. This is what they do. Plus, they are beautiful, they enrich our lives. So I think it is very important that we consider that. Irene Davy, last year, this year, in this January, she provided also a letter to us. She has also provided letters in the past when the motion was going through Seychelles. But just one of the highlights of the letters that she says is cats cannot be blamed for killing wildlife. The owner of the cat is placing a higher value on their pet than on the life of the wildlife that it kills or maims. The cat is not killing the wildlife for food. It often tortures it by playing with it, causing severe injuries. The wildlife is in its natural home. The cat is not. And so they give us some suggestions. They recommend the owner of the cat that provides a safe outside enclosure for the cat called catio. And this not only will protect wildlife, but also protect the cat. And she mentioned about people coming to the Gibson's wildlife asking for traps to trap coyotes because the coyotes kill after their cats. So now we are going after wildlife to protect domestic cats that unfortunately don't belong to this environment, right? And if people, it would be nice everybody understand a little bit of evolution and biology. When animals are not, they don't evolve with the species, they don't have ways of defending themselves. So the cat is a killing machine. It's a beautiful animal, but it's a super adaptable animal. And it kills birds that are not used. And if you have the argument, for example, well, we have local cats. Yes, we do. We have bobcats, we have cougars, but they populate one cougar will populate an extensive amount of land. So you don't have the density. And even though a cougar might kill some birds, they probably prefer other mammals, but it's not significant. But the problem with the cat is that the cat it's overpopulated. It's a big dance. So there is a study, the same study put by Environment Canada with some statistics from Humane Canada. Based on their calculation, for example, municipality of the size of Gibson's, we are about 5,000 people, we would have 10,000 birds killed annually by 625 roaming cats, which is the statistic. In Canada, about 33 to 38% of people have cats, which is a lot if you consider that the households, between 33% and 38% households have cats. And this is Environment Canada as well. So there's this issue of biodiversity, right? Impacts, ecosystem service impacts, right? Because we don't have birds to control pests. We are already impacting ecosystem functions as well. And then we have impacts of disease. That's another can of worms. I put a study that was just, I hope counselors had the opportunity to read. In November 13, which is past month, Global News just put new research from UBC, and they are suggesting domestic cats are helping spread dangerous parasites to wildlife and humans. This is not new, but I'm glad that UBC is looking at that. What's the group? The Canadian Veterinary Medical Society, they have extensive work on that. They ask, obviously, as part of a multifaceted approach to prevent, not only regarding cat welfare, but diseases, and they are quite concerned with that, and they support legislation, cat bylaws to avoid all this. There's a program called One Health, which is basically an approach that CDC, the Center for Disease Control, use, and they warn of the dangers of toxoplasmosis, toxoplasma, which causes toxoplasmosis. not only in wildlife, but in humans as well. And that roaming at large cats are more likely to catch and spread this disease. That's another thing that is hard for someone to understand, but cats in particular, they have their bodies are the host for these parasites. So these parasites, you need to complete some life cycle that they don't complete in other, not necessarily in other mammals. So if other mammals like us, we get the parasite and we might develop disease, but we don't transmit. Cats, they transmit. And the amount of transmission, there's some study, the UBC study. I just want to alert, because I'm so glad that UBC is doing that. They say new research from UBC suggests domestic cats are helping spread a dangerous parasite to wildlife. Should you keep your pet cat indoors? Yes. And so they say toxoplasma has an interesting life cycle in that cats and domestic cats and wild cats are at the center of its life cycle. So a single infected cat can shed as many as 500 million oocytes, which is the eggs, in a 2-week period through feces. So this is another issue that we encounter. We are now talking about food security, right? I mean, people are more and more having gardens at home, and they're being visited by cats, and cats defecate on the gardens. And now you go there in your own garden, and you might not have a cat, but now you have to deal with feces from neighbors' cats. Another issue is sandboxes, right? We have we have playgrounds and kids go there and play with the sandbox that might be infested by cats. We are just, council approved this year, a community garden that soon will be built here in Gibsons. And we have no defense against cats. That's another thing. With dogs, you can put some fence. Cats, you don't, they jump. So that's another big concern. And this disease, I don't know, Councilor Ledwig, if you are aware, because in the St. Lawrence, they found many belugas dead, 44% of the belugas, which is 15 belugas. So they probably found over 30 belugas dead, 2020. And they found that toxoplasmosis was in many of them, and at least in one they determined that that was the cause of death. So we are here on the West, still a smaller population, and we are not too contaminated, but what happens, sewage, a lot of this goes through the sewage, right, with cat litters and things, and the waters are contaminated. So this is another concern, big concern. Right now, yeah, we are not facing any evidence, but we have lots of mammals on the coast, the population of sea lions, coming more and more depending on our weather. So this could be a future issue. And then there's the cat welfare as well, right? We know that a cat that enjoys the indoors, the only thing that he misses is being killed, injured by coyotes, by cars, by other wildlife, being stolen, getting lost, being, in the cold or in the excess heat, being mistreated. People who don't like cats, they might throw rocks on cats. They do, they shoot cats. They can get infections. They can get rat poisons, antifreeze, ticks, fleas, and getting collar cuts. So the cat suffers. And actually, Irene talks about that. The SPCA talks about that too. Many of the letters, and the literature, the information is vast about obviously the issues with roaming cats. And this year as well, we received a letter from the SPCA, and our Sunshine Coast branch, and they talk about the return to owner rate. While dogs have a 74% rate, so they probably sacrifice very little dogs. Cats, on the other hand, the rate of return is just 26%. So they're euthanizing a lot of cats, right? They have to, right? So this is also, we're talking about cat welfare. And so just to, then I think one thing that it really touched, I thought was important to put here is it's like a more philosophical, more moral or ethical, but the reason humans say that they have human rights is just based on the fact that they exist. Therefore, I have the right. I have rights. I have rights to have clean air, clean water. I have a good existence. I have the rights of not being, injured by anyone. So there's all these rights built by humans just by the fact that they exist. And if you look at if we transfer this, the natural world also have the same rights to exist. And I think modern humans have not been kind to wildlife and to environment, because we look at resources that we can just go there and take whatever we want. And we think like that, wild birds are sentient beings. There's more recognition now that even I think in India, right, they're calling dolphins now a person, because they understand, whales, all these animals, they're sentient beings, and they are part of the natural world. And I think, they have intrinsic rights to live and not being destroyed by domestic cats. Yes, we have the rights to have domestic cats, but our rights of having a domestic cat ends when we start killing wildlife. So people have the rights, they can maintain the domestic cats in their homes and treat the animal, but I don't think they have the rights to kill wildlife. So that's, to me, is a ethical issue for me. And then there's also a more pragmatic approach, is the fact that birds really help sustain ecosystem service, right, which are important to us. So, and then more fundamentally is the right that Gibson's residents have to have peace when they are enjoying their gardens, right, and not be invaded by cats that they don't desire, right? We don't have this issue with dogs. Dogs don't walk into your property, but cats do. And we don't have any recourse. A resident doesn't have a recourse to go there and discuss because usually a person who does that doesn't have awareness or doesn't care, either or. So it's a very challenging thing. So that's why having a bylaw, it will be a mechanism that would help the complaint, right? I mean, before even you complain to the town, a person could approach the neighbor and say, "Hey, are you aware there's a cat bylaw, and there's reasons why the cat bylaw is in place. There's disease, there's the impact on biodiversity, and there's this and there's that." And an educational campaign, obviously, it's a must. We should not have the bylaw without the educational campaign. But what I would like council the committee now to discuss, to consider, is not to invest in educational campaign and not have a bylaw, because Seychelles tried that. It didn't go too far as I understood. And if you consider, many municipalities are enacting a bylaw. So if education was enough, why bother with a bylaw? So I think if we have an approach that we announce as soon as the beginning of 2022, I mean, we became a biosphere reserve. This is it's just a natural course of the way we are addressing issues. We have our natural asset management, our state of the art. We export this program, and we look at stormwater benefits. We are looking now as, the benefits that bring to us that depends on aquifer, right? So all these ecosystem services and biodiversity it produces a lot of ecosystem services, right? So I think it's timely. I think we have our communication officer is, so capable of putting a package together. There's so much information already in place. There are many volunteers that have this information. I got this together based on the other program and a little bit of more research. It's not difficult. And yes, I don't think the town has to reinvent the wheel. The SPCA provides a package based on, they have expertise in animal control, animal behavior, welfare, wildlife management, legal system, and they put an evidence-based model by law that any municipality can take advantage of. Excuse me. They also have educational materials that we can use. And so I really hope that we could move this forward. I think there's many advantages of having this bylaw. I put also here answers to bylaw implementation because there's always questions around, and I'm trying just to answer some of these questions. The bylaw will be complaint driven. Obviously, there has to be affordable. And even though it might not offset a lot, but it may offset some of the bylaw running costs. We can provide incentives, like cat license sales, the same way we do with dog license sales. And I think the bylaw, like I mentioned before, will provide residents with a recourse for conflict resolution. And there will be a lot of benefits, right, for the environment, people, and cat welfare that I believe will outweigh the cost of the implementation. And just to close, I think it is our responsibility. I think as a municipality, we have responsibility towards our biodiversity, especially being in a biosphere reserve. We have responsibility to our residents, right? Their peace of mind, their health, and also cat welfare as well. I think it's a humane thing to care for the cats. If the owner doesn't, it's not that they don't care, but they don't have awareness. So I appreciate this time that councilors listen. I also put a lot of the cuts that I have been collecting from the newspaper from our birder, Tony, and other people. And also at the very end, I put a picture of this. He's probably a tree climber, like rescuing cats. And I don't know if the counselors had the opportunity. He said in this week, 2 cats. So that's how cats go, right? And in this case, was a happy end, but it's a lot of cost, right, to try even to recover a cat. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, Councilor Ludwig.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd just like to thank Councilor DeAndretti for putting in all this effort to bring this package to us. I know this was on our agenda before and then it's kind of slipped off. So thank you for that. I totally agree. Environment Canada has been saying for a long time that cats are one of the biggest threats to songbird populations in Canada. And as I said last time this came up on our agendas, it's a hard one for me because I am a cat lover. And as much as people say cats are happy inside, I don't know how true that is, but it doesn't really, at this point, it's almost irrelevant. It's getting to the point now where as the human population increases, more people have more cats, which is causing more impacts to the bird populations. And I do think you made a compelling argument about us joining the Howe Sound Biosphere Reserve, and biodiversity is biodiversity. And so it almost has become like a no-brainer, really. I mean, whether I like it or not, we have to face the fact that cats are predators, and we have introduced this lovely little predator into our lives, and that we have to take responsibility for that. So I think the motion's a little bit, I don't want to say weak, it's a little bit, maybe it is a bit, I'm not sure what we're really asking staff to do. But I understand the gist of what you're asking for. You're wanting us to include cats in the dog bylaw to regulate them from being allowed to free roam. And so I support that. I don't know if we need to work on the wording a bit of the motion, or if that's adequate for staff. If they feel like that's enough, then that's fine. But I support what you're doing.
Okay, Councilor DeAndretti, you can respond.
Yeah, I think the reason I I crafted this motion this way because, I mean, Mayor Beamy several times even mentioned, we like to hear from staff. And so I didn't want to propose because I actually got the bylaw and I started like going over, but I thought, no, let's go explain, make the case. And now, you know, if this goes to council and council approves, then we are asking staff to amend the bylaw. And I think, you know, if staff needs some help, there's many volunteers, there are many people I could even go and provide some help. And obviously they would be the ones that understand the bylaw, where should be amended and things, but there's models. So I didn't want to, and that's what it is. It's just that, you know, if we accept, I think actually in this regard, maybe you should say that the committee direct staff or the council, that council direct staff to amend the dog, because right now we have a dog licensing bylaw. And I think many municipalities now, they're not focused only in dogs, right? Because there's a lot of pets. People bring, you know, all sort of snakes and things. and so there's a trend of having an animal responsibility bylaw.
The proper phraseology at this stage is that the committee recommends to council.
Thank you.
Okay. And then council directs all day. Councilor
Yeah.
Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish, and thank you, Councillor D'Andretti, for this report. I have a few issues. You know, I have indoor cats, so, you know, and interesting comment, when we got the cats, we turned to the vet and said, what's your feeling about indoor cats? And he said, how often do you want to see me? The cats are now 16 years old and they've seen the vet twice actually, once for their shots and the second time to be neutered. So a couple of issues. I have grave concern of staff's capacity to deal with another bylaw now. I don't know how soon you want to see this, but we have a short-term rental bylaw, we have a tree bylaw, we have reviews of DPAs 1, 2, and 9. We're short-staffed and we've got people doing jobs off the corner of their desk because of the staff shortage. So I don't know what sort of timeline you're envisioning for this. We were just recently provided a report on bylaw infractions and the number of infractions that our bylaw officers dealing with. And if you take the number of complaints we've had, she's averaging 4 or 5 complaints a day. So I'm a little concerned what this is going to do to the capacity. Another issue is right now I'm noticing a huge amount of public pushback to being told you have to do this, you have to wear a mask, you have to get vaccinated. One thing and another, people are sort of rebelling against government saying you have to do this or that. So I'm concerned about putting yet another thing out there. The affordability of it, a lot of people who have cats and they're indoor cats, and are we going to distinguish that all cats have to be licensed, or is it just cats that are allowed to roam? So that's another component that I would like to be considered. The city of Calgary, and there's a group there called Cats and Birds Keep Cats Safe and Save Bird Lives. The city of Calgary recommendations include not only bylaws, but public education and collaborating with local stakeholders to develop a strategy and measuring and messaging mandatory identification and or licensing, accessible spay neuter programs and feral cat care programs. Here in Gibson's, Violet Weingarten used to operate Happy Cat Haven. And she had volunteers who'd go out and catch feral cats. They would try and find homes from them. Sadly, not all of them found homes. That service, to my knowledge, is gone. you know, the other thing is when you look at Gibson's, it's 2 square miles. So what do we do about the regional district? Where I live on North Fletcher, on 3 occasions now, we've collected cats that have been wandering and ultimately discovered they were from Granthams. You know, so what do we do about cats that come into our community? We can't find someone who lives in Granthams because we have a cat bylaw in Gibson's. Yet we get cats coming into area E, we get cats coming in from area F. So I think, you know, if we're going to bring in a bylaw for cats, it has to be in conjunction with the regional district because, you know, cats don't say, oh, wait a minute, I've just hit the Gibson's town line, I better run home. You know, they wander. So I've just expressed some of my concerns with respect to the capacity of staff to deal with drafting another bylaw now and the enforcement of it. And do we have the capacity within our bylaw department to enforce another bylaw that could be? And the other thing too is our bylaw, I think, really should be roaming animals, not cats or dogs, because there are animals in the city of Calgary. Their bylaw isn't a cat or dog bylaw. It's a roaming animal bylaw because people do have other, you know, pets, rabbits, for example, that get out of their cages. Should they be licensed too?
Mhm.
You know, to your thing about disease, ducks carry a disease that kill cats. So, you know, it's, you know, so there's a lot of issues there. So I'm, you know, I think people need to be educated to be more responsible, which seems to be the direction the District of Seashelt's taken. I'm more concerned about infiltration of cats from, you know, our neighbors than I am about, you know, whether the District of Seashelt has a bylaw or not. Anyway, those are just a few of the comments I wanted to make with respect to this.
Yeah, it's easy to agree with everybody around this table. And then everybody makes sense. It all makes sense. The biggest things I have concerns about, well, 2 concerns. One is imposing another regulation or cost on people. I would be in favor of something that people voluntarily come in and put a license for their cat so that their cat can be located and picked up and returned to them. You know, with dogs, we license dogs, but with that licensing, I get to walk around the community. I have access to dog bags for the disposal of dog poop. I have a garbage pail that the staff manage that picks that up. So there's a service that I am being provided as a result of buying a dog license, and I appreciate that, and the whole community appreciates that. With the cats, there's no real service we're providing other than we know whose cat it was run over on the street or was picked up. And, you know, frankly, try to catch a feral cat, it takes a bit of time. So, but that's my big concern, is that we're imposing another cost on people. And I just don't see it time-wise as a priority right now. I'm quite in favor of if sometime in 2022, council wants to bring in a bylaw on cats and preceded by education. I'm happy with that. But it did not hit our list of things that we wanted to accomplish in 2022 when we met a month or so ago. It wasn't there, as were probably not several other things that we're going to all individually bring up. But I think that at the same time, if staff sometime in, whether it's before the election, that might be a good thing to bring in a cat bylaw when they have time on their agenda to do it. I'm fine with that, and then I'm happy to consider it, but not to make it a priority that we have to start 2022 with a cat bylaw. I think that just says drop what you're doing and focus on this next, because that should not be our priority in that way. So if we can do it without charging people, as you say, I think you mentioned 30% of households had cats. That's charging a lot of people. who right now don't have that annual fee, and also making them come to the office and get a license and deal with that. So I would rather we find a way to do that, not charging people if they want to come in and pick up a license. And if we have those kind of licenses available, we can make that available to them. So my view is so. Go back around the table. Councilor DeAndrade, you've heard everybody. You can respond.
Exactly. I want to address, first of all, yeah, the goal here is an anti-roam bylaw, right? So, and that's why I said cats slash other animals. I maintain the cat just because that's the focus, but it should be an animal bylaw. I totally agree. The charge, I didn't propose any charge here. I mean, usually municipalities go through license, but that's something to discuss. I don't think, if you want to do a free, fine. I think it's more obvious identification helps to understand who the cat is. And with regards to the dog service, if you think about it, while you're walking your door, it's free to walk their cat. There are some people who do now. Actually, you will see more and more in cities. This is already happening in some cities. People go with their cats on a leash. I used to have a rabbit, and I did that too. When I was in Jericho Beach, I didn't want to have my rabbit had a leash, so that it showed responsibility. And if it would be nice if cat owners would get a bag to collect their cat's poop, because I think, and that's what happens with cats. People have this idea that cats are wild animals. They're not. Domestic cats, it's not a wild animal. And therefore we have to care. We should have and get their feces. I think I understand the issues of cost by law enforcement and adding to the load of staff. I get that. That's why what I said is an educational campaign at the start of 2022. I didn't put a date, but I'm saying we can, because making a package together educational, but with the idea that council will enact a bylaw. So, because what happened in Seychelles, I consulted with Seychelles staff. There was just something that went on the website for a month. And if you see, part of these complaints of cats are also people in Seychelles. So it's not that the situation resolved. And we know it does not resolve. Education resolve. Some people would be aware. Some people are just maybe not aware. But you would have a contingent of people that they kind of don't care, but they're still impacting their neighbors, right? I mean, why don't I have the right to have my peace of mind here in my garden, enjoy my birds? What do I do if a cat that comes? What is my recourse? Because if I do something damage with the cat, because I would consider between the domestic cat and the birds, I'll save my birds. I find birds dead. People find birds dead all the time. So what about if they decide to go after the cat? Oh, that's inhumane. So nobody can do that, right? Nobody can go, and some people may trap the cat just to give to the SPCA. And if nobody claims, they might euthanize the cat down the line. So that's not inhumane. But so I understand Mayor Beamish and Councilor Crowe that, yeah, we have issues. But at the same time, I think this is something that we could do in steps, but announcing that we will have. And one thing is very interesting. We have a tree by law to protect trees, but we are not protecting the inhabitants of the trees, right? We want to preserve the trees, and the trees need birds to get preserved as well, because birds control pests that attack trees. So we need to think holistically. And this thing about, I know people are tired in this the times that we are going through vaccination lock, but at the same time, we cannot just forget biodiversity crisis is the top concern in the world in terms of crisis. If we have a top crisis, the planet, it's biodiversity and its extinction. And the thing is, Once we get the biodiversity gone, the ecosystems will be, the service won't be provided, and we're going to be affected. And we need to step to the plate and say, this is something that is now, it's not tomorrow. It's the same issue with climate change. I know about climate change for 40 years after, oh, don't know, because impact the economy, impact, and now we are living a crisis. And in this crisis, biodiversity is the top. So and now we are in the what are we going to do with our commitments? We made commitments with the becoming a biosphere reserve. So what are we saying with this commitment? Oh, sorry, now we cannot do anything. I think we can find ways of doing.
Hey, Councilor DeAndrea, thank you. I'm going to go to Councilor Ledwig now.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, like, I think bylaws serve a number of functions. The first and foremost, most obvious, is that they regulate. And so, yes, that's an obvious. But I also think that they educate and set the tone for what the government prioritizes. And I have to be honest, I would be shocked if this community, if 30% of the people in this community had cats, primarily because there's so many coyotes here. I don't see cats surviving here very long at all. Regardless, I think if we could draft a bylaw that simply stated what our expectations were, I would be surprised if it was a big time commitment on behalf of our bylaw officer. But it would definitely set the tone and educate the public about what our expectations were and where we place biodiversity as a priority in our community. And so I think there's just different benefits that come out of it. I hear you though, Mayor Beamish, about, you know, where does this sit as a priority and what we have set out to accomplish in our last year on this. So, I mean, I don't know if something could simply be drafted that, or we make a statement that by the end of our term that we're going to get this in there somewhere. You know, that's one way of approaching it. I agree with you that I don't think we need to license cats. I think that's an unnecessary expense on people. Just simply having a bylaw saying that free roaming cats is just not acceptable anymore because of their impact. You know, and if they are caught free roaming, then it's an issue. But I don't think we need to license them. So I don't think it has to be overly complex, personally.
Mm-hmm.
Councilor Crowell, your last word, and then I think we should get a resolution here.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Beamish. I did have a brief conversation with our bylaw enforcement officer, and one of the things that was highly recommended, and this goes for dog owners with licenses as well as other pet owners, is a collar with a tag with your own, even if it's just your phone number. Doesn't have to have your name, just your phone number. So if someone finds an animal, they can pick up the phone and say, hey, I've got a cat here. It's been hanging around my house for a couple of days. It's hungry. It's come in now. We've got the collar. Here's your name. If a cat has a license or a dog has a license on a weekend when the town office is closed and it only has a dog tag, there's no way of tracing that animal. So, you know, putting a tag on your animal with the name and phone number, you know, goes a long way, because a lot of times, you know, these animals are found on weekends when the town office is closed. You know, I'm not disagreeing with, you know, cats need to be controlled. What I am, as I mentioned, my biggest concern is just the capacity of our staff to deal with this at the moment. I think if we were in a position to step up a little more of an education program, particularly as we're getting into the season where, you know, a lot of the wildlife that would prey on bird feeders are hopefully hibernating. So, you know, people are putting out bird feeders again, which is going to incentivize cats to take advantage of the feeding birds. I think, you know, a lot can be gained with putting out some meaningful messaging to make the public aware, and you know, if the public, you know, hopefully will step into line. I would also be inclined to see if we can find someone that would work in the capacity that Violet Weingarten used to work in, because
Sorry, what?
Happy Cat Haven.
Oh, sorry.
She had volunteers who, would trap feral cats, have them neutered, try and find homes for them if they couldn't. And Violet was a great advocate of, cats living long lives indoors. So
Can we come to can I suggest a resolution based upon what Council DeAndrea has provided? And that's simply that the committee of the whole recommends council direct staff to draft amendments to the dog license regulation bylaw to address the threats posed by roaming cats to biodiversity, conservation, human health, and cat welfare, and that the bylaw be presented to council in 2022.
Okay.
Okay, and then taking, we have staff here on the call listening to us, getting that tone, and maybe there'll be further conversation around it in terms of that. But as I say, it'd be great if we didn't require licensing of cats or fees to be paid. I like the idea of encouraging people to put names on their cats' collars or brands on their cats, whatever they want to do. But if council is comfortable with that, would somebody care to make that recommendation or amend it?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'll go to Council DeAndrea. You'll make the recommendation, Council DeAndrea, and
Thank you.
seconded by Councilor Crowell. Okay, all in favor of that? Yeah. Thank you very much. So I think it's a way to move forward, and I think it's an issue that we have had before us in the past and have not addressed it. And I appreciate that Council DeAndrea did a lot of work in bringing that forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And can I just say something? That's why I said, if we can introduce, and obviously we can ask Elizabeth, for example, I don't know her load right now, so we can work, we're not imposed, it has to be generic. But if there is an opportunity, for example, that this goes on the next bill or whatever, in 2 months, maybe she can put something together, then we can announce that council will be working. And that's the reason. So that's the kind of education. But people, the same way that we announce that the tree bylaw is coming, right? People are getting psychologically prepared, and then the education will go. Because I think if you just say education, I really appreciate this.
I don't think there's an urgency to amend the agenda tonight to put it on. I think it'll come forward at our next agenda in 2 weeks. So thank you. Councilor Crowell.
I just noticed that the press is in attendance, so I'm quite sure that Connie will put the word out, the conversation that's transpired today for people who've missed the meeting. And we'll probably get a lot of feedback one way or another. So
Exactly.
will help direct
we should encourage that feedback, perhaps in our municipal memo, highlighting this as well. So,
yeah.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to Councilor Ladwig, notice regarding travel expense reimbursement and vehicle insurance.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Mayor Beamish. This is just a real simple housekeeping item. Mayor and council are asked to submit their cell phone bills and their internet bills 2 to 4 times a year, where we're expected to calculate out a certain percentage of our expenses, fill out the travel expense claim, print all this material off, send it into the office, have our director of finance audit it, calculate out whether or not we got it right or not, which I often don't. And then we get reimbursed for a couple $100. Like it's really, it just seems like kind of a silly amount of work for all of us involved for a very small reimbursement. And so I brought this up last year. I'm just bringing it up again every time we're asked to submit these expense claims. I'm requesting that we consider just giving mayor and council a small allowance to go towards their phone bills, their internet bills, and any other hardware that council is expected to use to conduct council business. We're using our own, I'm using my own personal phone, I'm using my own personal internet, as we all are, and we're expected to submit invoices and paperwork to do this. Like it would be much easier and more efficient if we just had a small allowance for that calculated into whatever remuneration is. So I don't know what it usually works out to be. It's a few $100s a year. It's like, why ask us to fill this out all the time?
Well, before we open it up to conversation, Director of Finance is here because that is actually not part of this particular policy that's on the agenda.
Well, it's Rebecca and I discussed that, and I was a bit confused by that as well. So
I think it must be elsewhere. So Director of Finance, is this written elsewhere that we get 1/3 of our costs for internet and personal telephone?
Thank you, Mayor. So it's a bit of a reference between, so council has a remuneration bylaw, it's 1263, and that's where your stipend goes in. That's also where references are to deputy mayor and meeting references. It does, however, in there, that bylaw reference back to expense bylaws for member of council expenses, and that's where the policy comes in. And so traditionally, to mimic the or reflect the council's previous remuneration used to have a 1/3 tax-free component.
Yes.
The town has reimbursed council members 1/3 of your cell phone and internet costs, and that is under 3.9.1 of the policy 1.27. And so it's not written specifically. It is a bit confusing because it's a travel policy, but it's linked inadvertently to the remuneration policy. So really it's been 1/3 of the expenses. And I can provide ranges of what that costs are if you like.
Yeah, and I guess that Councillor Ladwig is suggesting that rather than have it, there would just be kind of a flat annual amount that is reimbursed to council members as opposed to having to put in a receipts for Eastlink and in my case, Eastlink and TELUS every month, every 3 months. So Councillor Diendrad, you.
I thought about something that may work because I totally support what Council Ladwig is doing. I myself, I have not presented my views. I have to do, but what I thought is if there is some universal rate that councillors get, and anyone that for a reason, I know the mayor might have more expenses or whatever, then they can present their expenses. I wonder if we can have this kind of, so if you're happy and there's whatever ratio the town decides that they would pay back a fixed amount. And if you pass a little bit, maybe you don't care. But if you pass a lot, you still have the opportunity to say, look, I got this, but my expenses were double. Do you think it would work so nobody's penalized?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it's I don't have a problem myself. I mean, finding my Eastlink bills every quarter, I could just download them every month and submit them. It's just, I don't need to do that, but they are available to me. So it's a fairly straightforward calculation. So I think that there would have to be some kind of invoicing. You would have to do some kind of invoicing so the town has something to pay against as opposed to automatically submitting, because there are others like Councillor Lumley. I suspect he's covered by his business because he doesn't submit his expense. So that, yeah, Councillor Ladwig.
I think Councillor Lumley's in the same boat as me. We both have full-time jobs. We've both got little kids. I'm sure he could use extra money. I just think this is one of those things that,
it's just one of those things that if it's an expense, you're offsetting an expense, there should be a corresponding expense. So that it's not just kind of an allowance you're giving it. It should be against an expense of some kind. So
salespeople get allowances for vehicles all the time. They get phones provided. They get, like, I mean, it just depends how you look at it. And if it's flat expense, it's a flat allowance. That's just what it is.
Yeah. I don't know. Director of Finance, do you have an experience other than what we're doing?
I don't, but I can speak to their council's remuneration bylaw, and under the expense section there, that's where Councillor Ladwig had mentioned that, the mayors often have more expenses, and the remuneration bylaw that is in effect right now recognizes that. So the mayor is entitled to an additional $500 annually for materials required to conduct business on behalf of the town. That also includes. Yes, and there's also $250 for each council member as well, same idea. It is a reimbursement though, so to the mayor's point, it does require receipts to be submitted. If council wanted to choose a flat rate for an allowance, like Councillor Ladwig suggested for cell and internet, that could be, I guess, incorporated into the remuneration bylaw. I would require direction on what an appropriate amount would be, because there is quite a range for the expense claims that councils have made previously.
Councilor Ludwig?
I'd be curious to understand how that ranges, because a phone bill is only so high and an internet bill is only so high. Like I would just, yeah, I'd be curious to know how that fluctuates so much. But anyway.
I think mine ends up being about $200, $300 a quarter, maybe somewhere in that area.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I remember it being too. Like it's not
Yeah.
a lot of
Yeah.
money. That's
No.
why it always feels like a silly amount of work for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Councilor Crowell?
Just sort of further to what you were saying there, Beamish, I'm assuming that there, for council to be given money, there has to be something that the council gives back to staff so they can justify the, the receipt, the invoice, whatever. The other question I had with respect to, like when I was the sitting on the regional district, I didn't claim mileage because quite often I would carpool with the other directors, and someone who was in insurance, they said, well, if you get mileage and you carpool, if you have an accident, you're being paid, so you're for hire, and it could put you in an insurance liability situation. So I don't know if staff have any further comment on that, because I noticed in the bylaw that staff are encouraged to carpool, and I was just looking for clarification on that.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the ins and outs of that in terms of that. Councilor Diandrat?
Just a clarification by Councilor Crowe. Can you, when you mention, okay, if we are, I didn't follow. So if we are carpooling.
So if let's say you're going somewhere and you're claiming mileage and you're carrying other people in your vehicle, obviously, so you're being paid. So it almost makes you for hire, which I was told can were you to have an accident, it could put you in an awkward situation because technically you're a paid driver.
Oh.
I think that there is a standard rate of compensation for mileage set by the federal government, by the CRA actually.
But
it's not a payment to the driver; it's a reimbursement for a cost.
well, it's a reimbursement for a cost, but it apparently there have been cases where it has been considered for hire, particularly if you're carrying other people.
Interesting. Okay. So how do we want to do this? Do you have a suggestion? What happens at the federal level, Councilor Diandrat? Do you have a federal phone, or do you have a council level? Sorry.
Yeah, we are not allowed to use our phones for federal business. So we are given a phone, we are given a computer, it's all
Okay.
very separate.
Right.
I have no problems with using my own phone for council work. I actually prefer how we do it. It seems like a silly, I walk around with two phones in my purse for DFO, like it's just a silly. So I have no problem with what we're doing. All I'm saying, and I didn't want this to be a big agenda item. I was just simply like, if rather than making all of us go through this effort, and I noticed that a number of councillors don't submit their expenses, I think because we probably are all busy. And so we're just using our own equipment for council to conduct council work. And so, yeah, sure, that can be a contribution to our community. That's fine. It doesn't really matter to me, but it just seems like a.
Yeah, I claim mine every 3 months. I'm not very good at the mileage reimbursement, and I always forget to do my car insurance thing. So that which is something that I haven't done. So and that's equally important, because if you're using your car to and from work, if this is the workplace, it should be insured on it. So, and or if you're going to a conference or something else like that. Perhaps Director of Finance, you could, or Mark, have you got any experience elsewhere as to other municipalities? Is there a flat annual rate, or is there a reimbursement based upon expenses invoicing?
Well, I think it's done various ways. That there's no, I don't think one set way for council remuneration for expenses. There is flat rates, and there is more, the ranges from flat rate all the way to, highly detailed expense forms. So
Right. Well,
the EBCM does have, surveys through Civic Info on the average remuneration expenses for other councils.
why don't we take a look at that and see if there's something that we can suggest that going into the new year that could be, I mean, it is a bylaw, which means we have to amend the bylaw.
Yes.
Unless we can add it in this policy section here and just amend this policy as opposed to being a travel reimbursement policy, it's travel and councilor expense reimbursement policy. Policy, and see if there's something out there that makes sense.
Yeah, if I could, your worship, that is traditionally done in a lot of cases now. Councils do it by policy rather than bylaw.
Yeah.
That way it can be revised and looked at annually.
Yeah. And asking the question to council right now, I mean, how's your remuneration? Do you want to take a look at that again? We adjusted that in 2018 when we came into council. We are going into 2022. We can leave it for the next council to take a look at and see if they're happy, or is there any change you want to make there? Councilor Ludwig?
I think as a standard practice, if a community wants to attract good council members, they should consider reviewing it at the end of each term for the next council coming in. That would be my just general thought. Like, you want to attract good people to govern your community, I think. So that's how I would think.
Yeah. Very often it's a not seen by the public to be a credible process when a new council comes in and immediately raises their remuneration, because it's more seen that the prior council takes a look at that and says, this is what makes sense based upon our experience and the time we put in the job and the hours, the numbers of meetings. This is more of an appropriate remuneration. One thing to do is perhaps to take a look at what else is happening elsewhere in the Sunshine Coast to make sure we're current. I mean, we do have within our policy that we do have an annual cost of living increase annually. So that is an incremental, and this year it might actually be more significant because I understand the cost of living. I think ours is based upon an end of October cost of living, so that it could be higher. But that being said, there should be some equity among the coast. We all do the same thing essentially, and it doesn't really matter whether you're a big community or a small community. Quite frankly, you spend probably as much time, or in a small community, maybe more time, because we have 5 members of council. Seychelles has 7, and the board has umpteen sort of thing. So that there's that opportunity to spread that work around a bit more. So something to think about. And maybe Director of Finance, if you wouldn't mind just taking a look at what is happening elsewhere on the Sunshine Coast with regards to mayor and councillor remuneration, and provide that back to us, just so we know whether or not ours needs to be tweaked, or whether somebody needs to catch up to us. So.
Can I jump in there, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
What kind of timing would you like for that information?
Oh, I don't think we're in a rush for it. I think it just that bylaw can be changed anytime, and I don't think I'm not hearing anybody say that they're not going to come to work tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
yeah, I think you've got the budget to do. Let's get it through that. And in fact, if we're going to do anything, I'd say we would want to maybe be considerate of the next council and have something in place for them as opposed to for ourselves. Councilor D'Andrade,
I was just going to reiterate that because I felt very pleased that when I walked here,
Yeah.
the other council took care of us.
Yeah.
And we didn't have to deal. It would be quite awkward to discuss this at the
Yeah.
very beginning of the mandate. So I think it's an exercise that every council towards the end of the mandate, they
Yeah.
should,
Councillor Crowell, do you have anything to add?
Funny echo in the room.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, well, so, I mean, I don't think there's any resolutions to make here. Just, I think that staff understands. We'll hear some options come back relative to how we handle our expenses. And again, before the end of the year, end of 2022, before our term is up, we'll hear something come back relative to the council remuneration. Unless corporate officer, you feel there should be a resolution?
No, I don't feel you need a resolution at this time.
Okay,
I think staff have heard what you're looking for.
thank you. Yeah, good conversation, though. I appreciate the opportunity to have it. So. Okay, that ends our formal part of our agenda. We have a resolution to close the meeting. We have some items to discuss under 4, and that's the meeting closed in accordance with section 91C, restaffing related issues, and K, returning service of a consultant of the community charter, and C, labor relations and other employee relations, and K, negotiations related to discussions respecting the proposed provision of a municipal service that are at their preliminary stages and that in the view of council could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of municipality if they were held in public. Somebody to make the motion? Councillor Crowell, thank you. Councillor Ladwig, all in favor of moving in camera? Okay, thank you. And before we do that, corporate officer will go to inquiries.
Yes, if anyone has a question or comment to make to council, now is the time to raise your hand. We have one hand raised. Mary Catherine Anderson should be joining you.
Thank you. You're still muted, Mary Catherine. If you okay, there you are.
Good afternoon, Council and Mayor.
Yes, good afternoon.
I was wondering if, what I would like to know is, according to the Department of Finance, for the $955,000 White Tower Stormwater Holding Pond grant, the Ministry of Finance says that the town is expected to do public consultation during the application process. But when I go back through the records and newspapers, I can't find any notice of any kind of public engagement regarding the grant. This must have happened over 2019, 2020. So I wanted to ask council if they recall of any public engagement being conducted for the grant.
I don't recall specifically, other than perhaps in the surveys that we had, but perhaps, and I don't see our Director of Infrastructure here with us, and the others who I do see here weren't here at that time. So we'll take that under advisement and get back to you. Would be probably the best way to handle that.
Okay. Yeah, and if there wasn't any public engagement conducted, maybe the town can do some retroactively. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, any other questions? Corporate officer?
If anyone else has a question, please raise your hand. I do not see any other hands raised at this time.
Okay, well, we'll thank everybody for their participation today and staff for attending, and thank you very much. And we are going to be meeting again at 7 o'clock. In the meantime, we have a in-camera meeting that we will move on to now, just as soon as the board is cleared and we stop recording. So thank you very much, everybody.